Okay, Ms. Scott, you wanted to speak?
Annie Scott, Fort Montgomery. When will you be having the next dedicated water meeting, or are you having one? And are you planning to offer your chosen alternative at the public hearing or prior to the public hearing?
The next scheduled water meeting will be a public hearing after we've had a chance to have a public hearing on the point system that we were talking about today. As soon as that public hearing is put on the table and it's held, then if it's approved and the board then ratifies that point system, then that opens the green light for the next public hearing, which is the actual water project, which is Alternative 6.
And you have chosen Alternative 6?
Alternative 6 was the chosen alternative from the beginning, correct.
Well, I mean, you've made that formal decision.
The board was very clear to the settlement that that was the direction we were going, and the settlement then proceeded to build the numbers based on Alternative 6. Typically, when you go into public hearings, you don't present 5 alternatives. You present the alternative that you're presenting to the public.
Well, correct. That would be why I'm questioning your choice of alternatives, and when the general public would have been informed of the delineation of that alternative, exactly where the water's going, and who's getting it, and who is not. When was the map placed in front of the general public so we can see?
That's during the public hearing.
And only during the public hearing?
No, it was placed in front of the public months ago.
No, I'm talking about at a meeting where people at home, I understand the maps have been in the building, I've looked at them, and the alternatives are about this thick, and all we asked for was a delineation when Lieutenant Colonel Smith came, and he made a nice little scale of where we were and how many people would be obtaining water, how many would not in this phase.
If your concern is simply a larger map, I do apologize for that, because I do believe you've asked for it, and I do believe I said anyway that I would contact the engineers. So I have failed in that regard, and I'll look into that if that will make the information more explainable.
I'm
to the
not
public.
questioning your decision. I'm questioning why it was not presented to me. Anyway, I'm speaking for myself. Each alternative listed, such as, again, what Lieutenant Colonel, regardless of the validity in what he presented, it was a very well-put presentation for the general public to look at. I went through the book of the alternatives. It would make your eyes cross. There's so much engineering mumbo-jumbo in there for, for what I'm saying is the general public. Did the engineer come back to the public after we spoke about that? I mean, perhaps I missed.
I don't think he presented in person. I believe he sent correspondence to the board.
That was what was discussed at a prior meeting, that the engineer would come back and discuss it. But if these things are needed to wait until the public hearing, then I suppose we'll get enough people in here to ask
Because the school is not a litigant, and the settlement master's #1 charge is to represent the litigant. Not everything happens perfectly, but I think that it's the responses that really make
the reason they're doing that, though, is because they contaminated our groundwater.
But the reality is that money is not being made available to communities like this. Now, I understand how the source is, but we're not debating that.
The communities like this don't have that money because they weren't contaminated. We were.
We're not complaining or debating as to the reasons. All I'm saying is that
don't make it sound like the fairy godmother's coming down and giving us a gift of 50 cents on the dollar. But it's there because there was litigation.
Right now, in total, is in excess of $3 million?
This project is approximately 2.9 or 3 with additional. There's a couple additional.
Right. There's some additional expenditures that is just on the settlement side of the equation for additional hookups. It's not technically part of the public project, but there's some additional money being expended.
Yes, my question is the contribution from the town is
about
1.5, 1.4 million.
Between those two numbers.
Because the truth of the matter is the litigants were never given a choice. And I don't care what any settlement master or anyone says. We were pushed, excuse me, I'm speaking now. We were pushed into a corner to sign on the dotted line to accept the settlement of $12 million, $6 million going into the community to obtain a water source. And now we're talking about giving a limited number of residents, including a private entity, an excessive amount of pipes when we're not giving water to the school system. And you can spin it any of your alternatives however you question why we're not facilitating more residents and we're doing a private entity.
And
However, again, I will bring those concerns to the public
Sure,
hearing.
and certainly you're entitled to that position, and you certainly can bring that up at the public hearing.
Just one last comment. I'm not really concerned about what your arbitrator decided. Your arbitrator is not a taxpayer in my community. They can have all the opinions they want. The community spoke pretty highly. I find it ironic that you wholeheartedly accepted one petition over another. You had the community residents here of numerous value.
I've accepted all petitions. Well, you're making
Mr.
statements that are incorrect.
And therefore, again, to Ms. Gunz's question, it's pretty simple. Spin it however you choose. Are you taking your salary increase at 100%, or are you not?
Specifically, I didn't, and maybe I'll change my mind when I hear something in the public hearing. But just in hearing her, I don't know that she's entitled to a written response based on the issue she raised.
Okay, but you acknowledge that we're still in the secret process.
Correct, of course.
The board has the ability to respond if they so choose to. The purpose of the public hearing is to determine whether or not there's anything that maybe has been missed or some considerations that maybe need to have further response. It's my understanding that after the public hearing, if the board doesn't deem that any of the items are of a high enough issue to change anything or make any change of response, then essentially it becomes a decision as to whether or not to ratify the actual project.
The public hearing in itself is an opportunity to go on record with a specific question related to taking a hard look at the project and getting some degree of formal response back that
But as
should
far
be
as
satisfied.
formal responses and so on, that largely rests with the determination of the board as to whether or not there is a necessity based on what was presented that required a formal response. The board could end up making no response and just proceed with the decision to ratify or not.